CNN Türk Gülşen Coşkun, teşekkürler. Sorum öncelikle Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Başbakanı Sayın Davutoğlu'na olacak. Efendim, az önce katılımcı...
Yes, we have a question for the Prime Minister. You told us that the process was revitalized. But during the meeting, did you touch upon the issue of Turkish membership? How much longer will Turkey have to wait? And Mr. Juncker talked about the issue of visa liberalization. Is there a timetable? Some information has been released. We heard about from October 2016, Turks could travel to Europe without visas. Is that true? Yes. Well, we didn't just discuss the issue of refugees. We also looked at the question of the negotiations, and there were some very positive consultations. So in that sense, all the heads of state and government took the floor, and they all said quite openly what their position was about the issue of Turkey's membership of the European Union. And they all said that it was important that we should take action, and we should take action together. Now, as I said earlier, 11 years after a significant summit was organized, and Chapter 17, a new chapter 17 is going to be opened up, which is a clear signal, and there's also going to be a declaration from the European Commission about the other chapters. So there probably will be an acceleration of the negotiations between Turkey and the European Union in the area of politics, energy, and high-level dialogue channels have been set up, and there will be high-level meetings twice a year. When it comes to visa liberalization, we also have a very open timetable in front of us. The first report will be issued in March, and then in June, Turkey will start applying the readmission agreement. And then the liberalization of the visa process should be triggered. And there are things that we have to do and things that the European Union has to do as well. So from the perspective of our government, as we said yesterday when we declared our government's programme, the European Union is a strategic objective. Membership is a strategic objective for us. And that's going to speed up again in 2016. This summit gave us the first initial signs for that. There's been some very positive developments. No disagreement emerged. So I think 2016 really will be a key moment in relationships between the EU and Turkey. Thank you.
I would like to add that this visa liberalization process is a process we are attaching a great importance to. There is a link, one should not forget, between the readmission agreements and the visa liberalization. This will be kept on our radar as a couple of things which have to be done together. The Prime Minister described in the correct way the process, and if all the requirements will have been met, I do think that this visa liberalization can enter into force in autumn 2016. Everyone having to know that we will not change the basic criteria commanding the opening of the visa liberalization towards Turkey, but I do think that this has been well understood.
If you allow me, one thing must be clear. With today's decision, both sides have committed to step up the tempo on these accessions talks with a view to making progress. But the benchmarks and standards will remain the same. I am absolutely sure that we can be more optimistic than before because of your determination, Mr. Prime Minister, and goodwill. But of course, our goal is the same as before. It means benchmarks and standards.
Thank you. The next question goes to the gentleman in the fourth row.
Hi, Lawrence Norman from the Wall Street Journal. A question for each of the leaders. For Mr. Davutoglu, can you offer any guarantees of what Mr. Tusk said earlier, that this deal will lead to a quick and substantial decline in the number of migrants coming to Europe from Turkey? For Mr. Tusk, if the numbers of migrants don't start to fall, how much of this fabled 3 billion euros will Turkey eventually get? And for Mr. Juncker, is there any sense of how many countries will participate in the voluntary scheme you talked about earlier and you discussed with the German Chancellor? And what numbers of people could we be talking about?
Okay. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Nobody can guarantee anything regarding the issue in Syria. I wish to say to you that, yes, the migrants will decline, the number of the migrants, but we cannot say this because we don't know what will be going on in Syria. When these bombardments are continuing against civilians by Syrian regime and its allies, when these terrorist attacks are continuing by Daesh, nobody can guarantee about the future of the victims of this tragedy in Syria. But I can guarantee that Turkey, and I can assure that Turkey will be completing and will be fulfilling all the promises mentioned in Joint Action Plan. When we implement Joint Action Plan, I am sure there will be a much more regular migration rather than illegal immigration. So here our purpose together with EU is, if possible, to prevent new waves of refugees from Syria. This is not only EU or Turkish effort, but there is a need of a joint work of all international community. Secondly, to manage the existing how to manage the existing refugee crisis. And our joint action plan is to regularize all these issues waiting for a solution. And I am sure if we implement our joint action plan, the refugee issues will be dealt in a much more appropriate manner, and there will be less pressure on Turkey and on EU. And this 3 billion euro is, again I am repeating, is to be spent for refugees in Turkey, not to Turkey. And our ultimate target is to prevent human smugglers, to prevent all type of criminal activities against refugees, and to regularize this flow as much as possible, and through this to decrease the number of refugees coming to Europe.
You know, today's deal is a package where we have agreed to deliver in parallel. And we will, of course, monitor the effects on the ground closely. At least once a month, COREPER will get a report on the facts on the ground. But we have to be clear, this is not a simple, trivial trade, money for numbers of refugees. It's impossible, and I think it's immoral also. It's, I hope that you know what I mean.
Wir hatten heute auf deutschen Initiativantrag.
On the German initiative, we had a meeting of 8 member states plus Commission on the resettlement of refugees currently in Turkey. The Commission supports this initiative, and by the 15th of December we will submit proposals about the detailed implementation of this initiative. I cannot give you the details to the nearest millimeter as to how many member states will participate on this voluntary resettlement scheme. I hope there will be several member states participating, and I think it's essential in our relations with Turkey that we use this resettlement program to relieve the burden on Turkey because of the high number of refugees already there.
I was saying this in English because I had the German translation, but it's if translated correctly, it's the same.
Are you sure?
No.
Thank you. We take another question. I see the gentleman there in the third row from the end. Yes, please.
Yes.
Last question.
Sonamut from NTV Turkey. I have two questions, one for the Prime Minister and one for the President of the Commission. Prime Minister, you said that we start a new era in EU-Turkey relation, bearing in mind that the support of the Turkish population to EU process was very low for the last 3 years. How are you going to revitalize the Turkish opinion as well in order to have the full confidence of the reform process in Turkey, no matter for the refugees, internal reform, and how are you going to keep the momentum in this process? And for the President of the Commission, we thought that Turkey was a bit forgotten for the last 2-3 years within EU. Now, since the refugee crisis, or because of the refugee crisis, there is a new momentum. How could we believe that, for example, the financial support from European Union to the refugees in Turkey, or the other issues the promise will be kept genuinely? Thank you.
I think Turkish society continues to support Turkish membership to EU. It depends which question you are asking to the people. If you ask the people, do you want Turkey being member of EU, the percentage is very high. But if you ask, do you believe that EU will accept Turkey as a member country, the expectation is very low. If there is a willing of Turkish society to be member, to change their mind whether EU wants to accept Turkey or not is a matter of joint results of our joint efforts. I am sure if we achieve our goals to open new chapters in next months and to have visa liberalization next year, the expectation will be much higher. Turkish society is a very dynamic, open-minded, and at the same time result-oriented society. It is also the latest election results shows this very well. 85% turnover, 97.5% representation is a miracle in modern democracies. And if Turkish people went to the polls with such an enthusiasm based on our promises, I am sure as a Prime Minister who got 49.5% support from the people, I will be able to convince our people that EU wants to see Turkey as a member country. And today, I was very happy that in our meeting, there is such a political will on EU side as well. Then, based on our actions, that momentum will be moved in a positive direction. And from our perspective, as I declared yesterday in our in our program yesterday in the Parliament, our government will be a government of reform. We will be doing everything possible to open as many chapters as possible and to do more and more reform packages in the Parliament. And if we are able to solve Cyprus question in next months, which is going quite well, the negotiations, I think Turkish EU membership will not be a dream which will be achieved in the future, but a reality in coming years. Thank you.
I don't think it's fair to say that we were treating Turkey with benign neglect in the last few years. That was not my impression, and that was not my agenda. Donald Tusk went to Ankara in recent months. I had a meeting with the then Turkish and the now Turkish Prime Minister months ago. I had 2 meetings with President Erdogan. We had a meeting between the President of the Council, the President of the Parliament, and the President of the Commission with President Erdogan. This was the first meeting between Turkey and the 28 member states. I'm drawing your attention to the fact that this was a meeting between Turkey and the 28 member states. And the Prime Minister drew your attention to the fact that the Cyprus settlement is an important step which will have to be taken in the next coming months. And I'm quite optimistic after having visited Cyprus. That was the only country I visited bilaterally, and after having listened to our Turkish partners, that things are moving in the right direction. I'm very grateful for that. It needs two to dance tango. We will propose as a Commission to open a certain number of new chapters, including chapter 24 about justice, freedom and security. And when discussing these chapters, we'll have to overcome the divergences of views we have in that very a particular domain. I'm quite optimistic that things are moving in the right direction.
In Europe, we need Macarena, not tango, because we are...
Thank you very much. This concludes the press conference. Thanks for your attendance.